Excellencies, distinguished guests, good afternoon and welcome to this high-level event on the margins of the 80th session of the UN General Assembly entitled Hunger in the Crossfire, No Time to Spare, Confronting Famine Now. My name is Yalda Hakim and I'm a journalist with Sky News. It's a great honor to be here with all of you today because, of course, we all care deeply about alleviating the current crisis that we're facing globally. First and foremost, I'd like to thank the EU delegation for hosting this important and timely side event, together with Guyana, Ireland, Kuwait, Sierra Leone, Slovenia, the World Food Programme, and the Global Network Against Food Crises. We gather today at a moment when the world stands at a grim and unprecedented crossroads. For the first time in modern history, the integrated phase classification analysis, the gold standard for analyzing the severity of food insecurity and malnutrition, reveals two concurrent famines in Sudan and Palestine. Global report on food crises notes that acute hunger has grown for the sixth consecutive year, with 295 million people in 53 countries facing high levels of acute food insecurity in 2024. In 2025, the WFP estimates that at least 319 million people are projected to face acute food insecurity, and there is good reason to expect the situation to deteriorate further in the absence of urgent global and diplomatic action. That's why the conversation we're having today is so important. At the same time, funding for these humanitarian crises is lagging dangerously behind soaring humanitarian need. The entire humanitarian ecosystem is at a breaking point. As rations are cut, so is the lifeline for millions of people in desperate need for assistance. Add to that the record-breaking attacks on aid workers that further undermine global aid response efforts. In 2024 alone, over 380 humanitarian workers were killed. Hundreds more have been injured, kidnapped, or detained. Equally critical is securing unhindered access to the most vulnerable populations, particularly in famine-affected areas, where denial of access not only deepens suffering, but constitutes a grave breach of international humanitarian law. It is clear that in these unprecedented times, that unprecedented measures are required. Now is the time to act. The international community must prioritize halting and defeating famine on its political agenda and ending the conflicts that are driving a global hunger crisis of epic proportions. Now, before I start, I'd like to flag that today's discussion will be live streamed at EU and New York's Mission YouTube page. I'd like to begin by handing over to our first speaker, Her Excellency Ms. Haja Labib, the EU Commissioner for Equality, Preparedness and Crisis Management, to open today's session. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Yalda Hakim. And thank you very much to all of you excellencies, colleagues, dear friends, for joining us for this very important discussion. And a special thanks also to WFP, dear Cindy McLean, for co-hosting this event, and to all also the co-sponsors. Allow me to start with a personal story. Last week in Brussels, I visited an art exhibition organized by the WFP of the Gazan artist Ahmed Mohanna. Ahmed painted on the only surface left to the artist in Gaza, the cardboard boxes of the WFP food aid. And I can assure you that his paintings are touching and heartbreaking. One of them shows a starving, emaciated child raising his shirt to show his ribs. And this image is burned like a scar on my memory. The food in these WFP boxes are the only thing keeping people alive in Gaza, while Ahmed's art on those very same boxes help keep hope alive for people who have lost everything. And indeed, it was a message of hope and of life from Gaza to the very center of Europe. So, dear friends, acute hunger is rising at an alarming rate around the world, nearly tripling since 2016. And there are many causes, of course, but one stands out: conflict and insecurity. Year after year, they are the main driver of hunger. Today, almost 300 million people face acute food insecurity, and most of them living in areas torn apart by violence and war. The DRC, the Sahel, Sudan, Haiti, Gaza, conflicts not only takes lives but destroys the ability to feed food supply. None of this is new. But in recent years, things have gotten drastically worse. The number of people facing extreme hunger is higher than ever. And right now, 2 million people are literally starving. And for the first time since the IPC was created in 2004, two famines are happening at the same time, in Sudan and in Gaza. And the tragedy is that these crises are entirely man-made, and they are also preventable. We know the pattern: fields and harvests destroyed, livestock killed, businesses shut down, market cuts off, and it's getting worse. Humanitarian access is blocked, aid workers are attacked, civilians are killed, waiting in line for food. And this is not collateral damage. This is hunger used as a weapon of war, a practice banned by UN Security Council Resolution 2417. And yet this crime is becoming more common. Worst of all, warring parties show contempt for the most basic principles of humanity. Dear friends, as the EU Commissioner for Crisis Management, fighting hunger and defending international humanitarian law are at the heart of my work. The European Union stands firm in this commitment. Our work has several fronts. Starting with advocacy, we will keep pressing for full respect of international humanitarian law, including UN Resolution 2417. Through humanitarian diplomacy, we push to protect civilians, infrastructure, and aid workers. And I want to work with all of you to amplify this message. But advocacy must be backed by evidence. And that's why information is key. The EU supports a pilot project with Action Against Hunger to track violations of Resolution 2417. And through the Global Network Against Food Crises, we contribute to regular reports to the UN Security Council on conflict-driven hunger. But again, advocacy alone is not enough. People need food, and they need it now. As global funding for food crisis falls, the EU has stepped up. Last year, we allocated more than 720 million euros to tackle hunger, 7.5% more than the previous year. And we will keep working to make sure our support is predictable, reliable, and reaches those who need it most. Ladies and gentlemen, today we see a return to the language of roundtables. Rules we thought were settled are dismissed as a burden. International humanitarian law is treated as outdated, a relic of the past, and it is the most vulnerable who pay the price. In these difficult times, we need to stand united and stay determined. We need to do more and do it differently, with fresh tools and bold ideas to defend humanitarian space and protect human dignity. And I'm confident that this session will spark new insights to push back against indifference. Together, we can strengthen the fight for more humanity wherever it is under threat. I thank you very much.
Commissioner, thank you so much. And I think your point about it being man-made and preventable is so important. And I hope that we can discuss that further today. I'd like to now invite our co-sponsors to take the floor. I'd like to welcome Mr. Neil Richmond, Minister of State, the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade of Ireland.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is an absolute pleasure to be here amongst so many decent people, to be quite frank, so many decent organisations, so many different countries. I have a wonderfully prepared set of remarks, and I'm going to cause absolute panic by not referring directly to them. So, yeah, there you go. So if I'm not a minister next week, sorry. But I think there's some key things that I really want to get across, and some of them are a bit emotive, but some of them are practical, based on, Commissioner, your opening remarks. And I suppose for those of you unfamiliar with Ireland, the very notion of famine is something that cuts to our marrow. Our country obviously suffered a great famine on Garth Moor just over 150 years ago. The reason why you see so many Irish bars in New York is that so many Irish people had to flee. A couple of them may have been called McCain. And it is something that still sticks with us. The population of Ireland still has not recovered to the population pre-famine today. Between emigration, between death, the indelible mark left by that famine has left in our mindset an absolute and utter revulsion. Commissioner, as you said, that we see today 2 famines in 2025 that are utterly and totally man-made. And I think this is what we need to be seized of in our discussion this afternoon, and indeed a lot of the actions that hopefully we will take this week. For Ireland, it's quite clear that how we respond is so vitally important. We absolutely maintain a food systems approach that tackles the underlying causes of hunger and malnutrition, but also we contribute so much more in terms of working with partners, both organisations and countries, the way we can tackle them. I think Tom Fletcher has summed it up a couple of times when he talks about the status quo to be a collective shame. Unfortunately, we do have to view it. And when we think about the situation in Sudan, particularly in 2025, we have the world's worst humanitarian disaster. Nearly 20 million people affected by severe rates of hunger, famine created by man. And the biggest issue is that access constraints are absolutely undermining the ability to respond to this great disaster. For Ireland, of course, we'll respond and we'll continue to respond. We've contributed over €11 million. In fact, just about an hour ago, myself and our Deputy Prime Minister announced an additional €3 million for the situation in Sudan to make sure that we can get humanitarian access. We've also responded robustly in relation to what is unfolding in Gaza, both in terms of our words and our deeds. We've provided over €29 million so far this year, and just recently contributed an extra €2 million to the World Food Programme, because what is happening in Gaza, ladies and gentlemen, it's an absolute affront to our shared humanity. And the pictures that we see at exhibitions, like the Commissioner referred to on our news, on our social media, and as a dad of 2 young kids, trying to explain why children are starving, why they're emaciated, why they cannot get the most basic access to food, to medicine, to shelter, to education. It's very, very hard to try and describe the level of depravity that is going on. And that's why we're taking a response. That's why it's very tough for a lot of people to think that this week a United Nations Commission has declared what's going on a genocide. That's what it is, ladies and gentlemen. And indeed, it moves us, it compels us to act and to respond, because the famine conditions in Gaza and the situation across the West Bank more broadly is absolutely unconscionable. And I think it would be remiss of me, before I go any further, Kate, and indeed Cindy, not to mention and share our absolute grief at the amount of humanitarian workers from both your organisations who have been killed. They haven't died, they've been killed, trying to service the best of humanity, both in Gaza, but indeed around the world. And a lot of us last night had the great pleasure of joining what was a very pleasant ceremony coordinated by our Australian friends. And the declaration, signing that declaration of protection of humanitarian personnel, it's one thing to sign a declaration, but it's what do we do about it? How do we enforce the rules-based order and international law that we all respect and hold so dear? Because when people get up and go to work, they have the right to know they will do so safely, particularly those who are providing food and medical relief to the most vulnerable and the people who are most at risk. I suppose just before I conclude, and a couple of things that need to be said, and I don't want to repeat everything the Commissioner has said because she's so eloquently, as she always is in our various council deliberations, put it quite clear that it's quite clear that in 2025, hunger is being used as a tool of war. And that is wrong. And there has to be a consequence for those who use hunger as a tool of war, because it is our absolute opinion that famine is never inevitable. Unfortunately, it has been the choice of some, but when it does happen, it is predictable, and where the political will exists, it can absolutely be preventable. But that requires us to act, and the time to act, ladies and gentlemen, is now. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you so much, Minister, for those powerful remarks. I remember about 14 months ago, you were trying to amplify and highlight these issues by giving as many TV interviews as possible. So we're grateful that you continue to try and humanize the kind of numbers that we continue to talk about. I'd like to now pass the floor to Ambassador Badr Saleh Al Tunaib, the Assistant Foreign Minister of Kuwait.
Yes. Yes, good evening, everybody. Thank you for giving me a chance to participate this evening. You know that Kuwait is always in the front line to support in humanitarian issues in a very different area. And I can assure you that we will continue in playing this role. And if you allowed me, I have some remarks. I don't want to repeat what you just mentioned and about this. Let's go and hand to hand together, put hand to hand together, to work together to find a real solution for this crisis. In the ground now, we are witnessing every day a lot of people, especially the young people, the kids are dying every day. We have to do something and we are ready to participate in any area we can suggest together this evening. And allow me to give some remarks on this evening. It's worth almost honor for the state of Kuwait to be one of the co-sponsors this vital event facing famine conflicts. Famine is indeed inevitable, yet conflict, displacement, the denial of the access to humanitarian aid continue lead more than 600 million living souls towards starvation. To this extent, Kuwait took upon itself to introduce Security Council Resolution 2417, which for the first time recognized the direct link between armed conflicts and hunger, and condemned the use of starvation as a method of warfare. We can all call member states of redouble diplomatic efforts to ensure humanitarian access. Most importantly, we must collectively hold accountable these who obstruct aid or target civilians. For history has proven that famine is always man-made, and it's always preventable. In conclusion, Kuwait stands ready to work with relevant partners to reaffirm that one should have starved as a result of conflict. Thank you.
Ambassador, thank you so much. It's now time to move to our expert panel, and I just want to sum up some of the comments that were made. The importance of finding a way to enforce action now, and the fact that it is time to act now. The idea that all of the millions of people that we talk about are people, and they have dreams and hopes, and they have families, and we talk about them as though they are numbers. So I'm hoping that our panelists will be able to highlight those issues a little bit further. But I'd like to introduce and present our panelists today. Mrs. Cindy McCain, known to all of you, Executive Director of the World Food Programme, Mr. Andrew Morley, CEO of World Vision International, Ms. Kate Forbes, President of International Federation of the Red Cross, and Ms. Joyce Musuya, Assistant Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Deputy Emergency Relief Coordinator. Thank you all for joining us. Ambassador McCain, I'd like to begin with you, because you and I, over the course of the last 22 months or so, have spoken a number of times, whether that's been humanitarians being attacked or restrictions on the sorts of spaces that you have wanted to access, trying to get aid into places where they are desperate for aid. Just talk us through how all of those things contribute to the sorts of humanitarian crises and famine that we are talking about. And then how do you mitigate it?
I'm doing like you, I'm putting my finger. First of all, thank you very much for hosting, co-hosting, and thanks for everyone who is here today. These are unprecedented times. Nobody, I don't think anyone in this room has ever seen anything close to that, and I hope you haven't, because this is what's going on in today's world is, as you said so eloquently, unconscionable. It absolutely is. So mitigating it is, we're not there yet. We're just trying to stay alive and trying to stay afloat so that we can help those who cannot help themselves. When we're denied access, like we are in Gaza right now, we're denied it, and we're deliberately shot at, and we're deliberately pushed around, and we're deliberately stalled so that we can be looted. And then they can say, see, they can't control it. They're being looted. It's these kinds of things. So part of what I've been asking for all along has been more diplomatic response, more harder diplomatic response. Malnutrition is evident and on the ground in Gaza, but we are not going to be able to even get 100 close enough to be able to stop, not just stop it, but stave it off in any way. So not only do we need our organizations, and we need a ceasefire now, we all need to be able to get in. All of us in the area need to get in fast and at scale, safely and unfettered, period. And as what I do also, and the minister was so eloquent about this as well, humanitarian aid workers are not targets. And the more we sit back and not yell at the top of our lungs as to what's going on, they're killing our people, then we have to keep the message alive. And unfortunately, there's so many messages and so many hotspots right now. There's a lot going on, so the bandwidth is less and less and less. I will say lastly, if I may, I want to thank the people on the ground that are outside the gates that are trying to help all of us get in. It's an incredible job. And as you know, the process is so complicated to get in and so difficult. But the people on the outside of the gate, the Jordanians, the Egyptians, and folks who have really been helpful on the ground, I want to thank them. They don't get enough credit for what's going on. They're really doing the Lord's work with this stuff. So I wish I could say and write lovely remarks, as was written for me as well. But the truth is, I feel it's more necessary to speak from my heart. We need help, and we need to get in now, and we've got to demand it. And I'm hoping that the SG and those others who are in power, positions of power, can help us do that.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mrs. McCain. Mr. Morley, I just want to pick up on where Mrs. McCain has left off. This is a unprecedented crisis. We are watching in real time hunger being streamed live to all of us, famine being almost weaponized as well. And yet, despite seeing it, we can't seem to be able to do anything. We're watching helplessly, and yet your organization, the WFP, everyone who is sitting around this table is trying to push those boundaries, trying to get access. How do member states, humanitarians, work together to be able to make, you know, the other side realize that it's necessary, access is necessary, hunger cannot be weaponized in the way that it is?
Thank you. And I liked your description, Sir Richmond, when you talked about this being a room full of the good guys, because I think we are. And I'm hoping that the good guys in this room can make the guys outside this room listen, because I think that's where the real opportunity is. But preventing and responding to famine only works one way. It works if we come together as partners, because each of ourselves, I represent World Vision, but also civil society, you know, we have a big role to play, but we can't fix this on our own. But together we can. Together we can make a difference. And one of the things I like is this idea of an all of society approach. It's this idea that we come together not just as individuals, but as a group, almost as a village, to make a difference to the people who need it now more than ever. I do think member states have a unique role. Why? Because they can give us space, they can give us access. The biggest challenge today isn't food. The biggest challenge today is access in so many of the contexts. We've heard about Gaza, we've heard about Sudan. I was there a few weeks ago. And the heartbreaking thing is you see food in warehouses just miles away from where you see starving people. And access is something that we can all fix if we come together, and member states can really help, because your voice is listened to in a way that our voice isn't. So we really call on member states to use your voice to help us get access. The second thing is we can, as the UN agencies, as NGOs, we can work together as partners. We all might be chasing the same dollar sometimes to try to help our individual agencies, our individual NGOs. But if we really think about the child, and I find it helpful when thinking about hunger to picture a child, if we think about their needs and not put our needs first, sometimes it might be better if that dollar goes to someone else rather than ourselves, because they might be better in delivering that child food. Third of all, we're not just recipients of aid. We can help to change the system. We can be system shapers. And the current humanitarian reset, I think, is an opportunity for us to do things differently, to do things wildly differently. Reduced funding is forcing that. But the fourth thing, and one of the most important things for me, is to think about children and communities as being at the centre of this. Evidence is overwhelming that when rations are cut, it's children that are impacted most and impacted first. So children that need the food most are the ones that are often the first to suffer when rations are cut. And in so many contexts, we've heard about Sudan, we've heard about Gaza. Let's not pretend any differently. Rations are being cut. Today, rations are being cut. So we do need to put children first, and we need to think about them and the impact on them in what we do. But this is a choice. Famine prevention is a choice. We need to make a decision whether or not we're serious about resolving it, because if we are, we can. Together as states, together as NGOs, together as the UN, together as everyone in the humanitarian space, we can make a difference. We can make a difference if we come together as partners to change the world for children that, let's not pretend any differently, today are starving. So I urge us to, let's do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morley. I'm just going to bring in Ms. Forbes, because, you know, just listening to Mr. Morley there and the other speakers, the fact is that it's not so much the food, it's the access. And you have a whole network in places like Sudan and Gaza, where they are risking their lives, the local humanitarians trying to get this food in and trying to get people to have access to it. Just talk us through some of the challenges that they are facing on the ground dealing with all of this.
Well, thank you so much for leading this group. And I don't want to repeat what a lot of you have said, but Yes, our structure is a bit different with, we have 200,000 branches around the world, 16 million volunteers. But probably the ones that in my heart every night are the ones in Sudan and in Gaza, because they are getting some aid. They're risking their own lives. And as we mentioned earlier yesterday, a number of them have lost their lives. And also, for me, I've been doing Red Cross work for 45 years. The fact that in this particular one, as was mentioned, in Egypt, in Jordan, we have warehouses full of supplies that we not only we can get in, we have it there on the other side. So it keeps being said over and over, but maybe it's because it's a truth. Not only don't we have access, we don't have safe access. And we need both of those to go forward. And I think Cindy made an excellent point. The other thing is we need to be sure it's sustained, because if people only see a little bit of aid, it tends to riot, it goes to the wrong people. And as you said, we're pointing at you and doing your job. We can do that when it's sustained and on. This man-made crisis, how they're different. I grew up mostly with natural disasters. Who thought that would be a good job? And now these, the political ones, it's the scale, it's the link. And behind the donations, quite frankly, is there's the political will. Who has the most political will for us to force the change that we need to have? So not to repeat over and over, but really what it comes down more than anything is safe access. If we can get that, if we can create voice, if we can create the pressure together, and I agree, there's so much to be done. No one of us can do it all. It's going to have to be a joint, and I can assure you, we're willing to work as a partnership. So I see that less of a challenge than maybe in previous years, but we need to have the political will to force safe access for all humanitarian aid workers to go forward. That's the biggest single challenge we're facing right now.
Thank you so much, Ms. Forbes. And just picking up on that point and coming to you, Ms. Musaya, that is the point, isn't it? That, we continue to see humanitarians, aid workers, they're suddenly fair game. International law is now not worth the paper it's written on. It's being ignored globally by those who are ignoring it. So then how do we have some kind of reset to take tangible action and do what we keep hearing, that the time to act is now?
Thank you very much, Yalda. And I also want to echo others to thank the organizers and co-organizers. I think most of you know about the humanitarian research, which was launched by the Emergency Relief Coordinator. And I'm looking at Cindy and many others around the table who are part of the leadership at the principals level. The humanitarian research actually provides all of us here with a creative opportunities to do things differently, specifically in preventing famine, but also responding very quickly to famine. And we do have examples of success stories, for example, using anticipatory action and anticipating famine in Somalia a couple of years ago actually saved a lot of lives, and a lot of colleagues here around the table, member states, communities that are not in this room were actually part of that story. So how do we scale up the anticipatory action in anticipating famine and preventing it is one area where I think the research provides an opportunity. The other is the use of pooled funds creatively as a fungible and flexible financing instrument. Last year in 2024, the Sudan Humanitarian Fund provided $40 million just to support famine and non-famine related activities, and particularly focusing on local communities. So predictable and quality funding towards pooled funding is another dimension. The cross-cutting issue is what others have also said, defending humanitarian action. It's extremely difficult. It's extremely dangerous to be a humanitarian today. So moving from statements to actions, moving from statements to real advocacy and defending our work is another area of, that the research provides for all of us to work together. So in summary, I think as the minister mentioned, the collective action, all hands on deck approach is the one that the research expects from us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Musuya. I'd like to thank our panelists for their reflections and insightful thoughts. I'd like to open up the floor now to the rest of the audience, and I'd like to call on some of our speakers. And if I could just remind you, we have about 30 minutes to wrap up and a lot of people to get through. So if you can summarize your thoughts in about 2 minutes, that would be greatly appreciated. I'd like to first call on Ms. Melita Gabrich, State Secretary for Multilateral Affairs, Political Affairs and Development Cooperation for the Republic of Slovenia.
Thank you, Ms. Hakim, Commissioner Ladnik, Executive Director McCain, distinguished panelists, Excellencies. I am pleased to be here with you today, in this room that is full of decent and good people. And I also have a pleasure to deliver my statement on behalf of Slovenia and Guyana as the informal focal point on hunger in armed conflicts. We are grateful to our host and fellow co-sponsors for convening today's event. And we also take this opportunity to acknowledge the distinguished panelists for highlighting the devastating impact of conflict on food security and hunger. Humanitarian workers and the UN staff who risk their lives to bring life-saving assistance to civilians deserve our deepest respect and appreciation. Ensuring their safety, protection, and unhindered access to affected population is, of course, of paramount importance. Slovenia and Guyana have been vigilant in responding to the rapidly deteriorating state of food insecurity in conflict settings in 2025 at the UN Security Council and beyond. Recently, the devastating confirmation of famine in Gaza compelled us to raise the issue in the Security Council briefings and through a joint media stakeout for which we secured the support of 14 council members. Similarly, with confirmation of famine in additional regions of Sudan, we pushed for an emergency council meeting, which has since brought greater attention to ensuring humanitarian access in the country. During this year's Protection of Civilians Week, Slovenia and Guyana initiated a side event on conflict and hunger, exploring evidence-based drivers, impacts, and tools. Raising awareness, underlining conflict as a key driver of hunger, and ringing the alarm is necessary, but it is not enough. We need collective political will and the conscious decision of all actors involved in conflicts to cease hostilities, to respect international humanitarian law, to protect civilians, civilian infrastructure, water and land, and facilitate safe and unimpeded humanitarian access at scale. We need to strengthen our collective determination and send a clear message that the use of hunger and starvation as weapons of war is neither allowed nor acceptable. It's despicable and is unconscionable. The lack of political will to take these crucial steps has created a famine in Gaza and a famine in Sudan. Recent reports warn of the risk of famine in pockets of South Sudan. Food insecurity persists and grows amid the continued violence in Haiti, Myanmar, Yemen, DR Congo, Sahel, and Syria. Dear colleagues, addressing the causes and impacts of food insecurity should be integrated in the efforts of the entire UN system, including the Security Council and the General Assembly. The main drivers of food insecurity, conflict, extreme weather events, and economic shocks are interlinked and mutually reinforcing. An effective response must rely on all three pillars of the triple nexus: humanitarian assistance, development aid, and peace building. Events such as this, which convene humanitarian actors, legal experts, member states, and policymakers, are indispensable opportunities to link realities on the ground with advocacy and action in diplomatic and multilateral fora. I look forward to continuing our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Gabrish. Can I hand the floor over to Mr. Ted Shaiban, Deputy Executive Director of Humanitarian Action and Supply Operations at UNICEF?
Thank you very much, and I just want to join other speakers to say that we really have an unprecedented situation with two concurrent famines. And this devastating truth is not complete if we also don't realize that in every famine, as Andrew was reminding us, it's children who suffer the most. And the youngest children suffer even more than that. In Gaza, 1 in 5 children under 5 is facing life-threatening malnutrition, and in Sudan, it's 3.2 million children. And what happens when a child is suffering from life-threatening malnutrition is the body consumes itself. Basically, it eats itself. And it moves from wasting to their organs shutting down until they die. And even if they recover, they face life-saving, life-altering, stunted growth, damaged brains. They're never able to reach their full potential. So we can't allow this to be normal. We have to maintain a sense of outrage and turn that outrage into action. And several of the speakers have spoken about, finding political solutions and continuing diplomatic engagement, because all of these are man-made events. They've spoken about access and protection of humanitarian aid workers, but let me add 3 points. Firstly, is to continue to protect the ability to gather data and information and to respect the data and information that's collected, including that done by the IPC, which is currently under attack. Secondly, to protect children as they're trying to access humanitarian assistance. Children waiting in line for treatment of malnutrition that are getting killed while they're in that line. And then thirdly, to recognize that the support for any kind of famine response or hunger is actually multi-sectoral. You need to go beyond food aid and the treatment of acute malnutrition. You also need to focus on health systems to address disease, as well as water and sanitation, prevent the spread of disease. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Shaiban. And just to help us better understand the horrors on the ground in Gaza, if I can ask Dr. Slimi to address the floor, because of course you've seen firsthand what has been going on.
Yeah, thank you so much. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for giving me some time to just speak about my experience. My name is Ambreen Slimi. I am an OBGYN and urogynecologist, and I spent the month of July in 2025, just a few months ago, in Gaza. I spent my month at Nasser Hospital, which is one of the few partially functional hospitals still remaining in Gaza, and most of my time was spent in the maternity hospital, where immediately I was struck by the number of women, by the number of pregnant patients that I saw who were acutely malnourished, who had obvious signs of being struck by starvation, and also being cared for by a staff, doctors, nurses, and etc., who were also severely malnourished and dehydrated. The months-long blockade that had started is an acute event on top of a chronic famine that's been going on. And this includes a limitation not only of food, but when we take care of pregnant women around the world, even here, and when yourself are pregnant, how important is nutrition and even taking a prenatal vitamin? These are things that are not accessible to the women in Gaza. For the pregnant women that were even able to make it to the hospital, because even Nasser was at this point in a red zone, and there was active bombing and tank and gunfire happening while they came, even the ones who were able to make it, they were malnourished moms giving birth to malnourished babies. So we talk about children, but let's take it a step earlier to the embryonic stages and fetal development and the effect that starvation has on that and the long-term effects. The mothers who did give birth and were lucky enough to give birth even though the babies were small, were not able to breastfeed because they themselves, again, were unable to lactate, to create milk. This causes an issue because we know because of the blockade, not only food, water, antibiotics, sanitation equipment, but also baby formula was an acute shortage. And these babies already at risk were now not even able to get nourishment outside of water, maybe with some sugar. The thing that really struck me, and the story I want to share with you, is one of my patients, Dunya, which is where the intersection of trauma and the ongoing bombing, blasting, and explosive injuries sort of met pregnancy, where life meets death in a way. And the role of famine and starvation in this really came to a head with a patient I was consulted, and she was a 20-year-old who was brought into the ICU. When I saw her, she was intubated, so she wasn't able to breathe on her own because of blast injuries. Her tent had been bombed 4 days earlier. Her husband had been killed immediately. She had both of her legs were broken. She had blast injuries and burns to over 30% of her body. And at the same time, no one really noticed she was pregnant because she was so malnourished. It was noticed later that she was about 5 months pregnant. It was her first pregnancy, and she had no other family around her. I was called in because I had access to an ultrasound machine that somebody had lent me. And at that point, she had lost sight in one of her eyes because of the injury. But with what she was able to see, I was able to make eye contact and show her that she had a baby that was moving. It was a boy, and there was a heartbeat. And at this point, because of her injuries, we knew that she had a very high risk situation. And after I came back home, I had learned that she had actually passed away. And yes, in part was because of the blast injuries and everything. In part was she was also trying to bring new life into the world. But on top of that, because of the famine, starvation, and malnutrition, her ability to fight off the sepsis and recover from her injuries was she was not able to overcome them. So yes, there is this famine going on, and it is a public health emergency. It requires an immediate response. Besides food, prenatal vitamins that are being denied, in the end, it's also a need for an immediate and permanent ceasefire because, again, this is all happening in the backdrop of injuries that are making, again, recovery incredibly impossible. And every day that passes without a ceasefire and an end to this blockade, we are just, sentencing more women like Dunya and other pregnant moms to the same fate. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Slimi, for those powerful, moving remarks and for humanizing the situation in Gaza and bringing us Dunya's story. Let's bring in Ms. Haneen Ahmed. We've heard about the situation in Gaza. Ms. Ahmed is from the emergency response room in Sudan. If you could give us a picture of the situation there.
Good evening, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Haneen Ahmed. I'm External Relations Officer for Sudan Emergency Response Room. I'm delighted to be here among all of you. Thank you for making this platform to the EU delegation. For those who doesn't know what's Emergency Response Room, Emergency Response Room is a grassroots movement with more than 25,000 volunteers across 18 states in Sudan. We are working to deliver humanitarian aid in this critical situation with a man-made problem, but we are trying to solve it by women and youth-led groups. The situation on the ground, we have health epidemic outbreak in Khartoum, Al Jazeera, Kassala, and Darfurian, all Darfur state, and Kordofan as well. We have cholera, we have lung fever, and we have hepatitis type B. We have also a siege and starvation in Al Fashir for nearly to 250,000 civilians and 190,000 civilians in South Kordofan. Unfortunately, we are trying to sometimes even smuggling the food. But one of the very sad stories that civilians is trying to smuggle food for her children in South Kordofan, and when the RSF discovered that, they cut her body in front of her children's eyes. And we have also a great success stories from the ground. We have rehabilitated a school in area affected by genocide in West Darfur called Mugjar. we rehabilitate the school, and we will start gathering together. And right now, more than 500 children, they are able to get back to school after 4 years they were out of schools. In terms of protection, we have 200 volunteers, 200 plus volunteers are being killed. Unfortunately, if our volunteer is not raped or killed or arrested or kidnapped, they are falling down sick by dengue fever or cholera, or so we lost a volunteer in a way or another, and there is no enough fund to cover this huge need across Sudan. Yes, we are in a great partnership with UNICEF, with WFP, with SHF, but unfortunately, the fund is not localized. And this is a huge problem for us because when the government gave us 15 million for Sudan, when it delivered to the grassroots body, it only 1 million when you count the cuts between organization and another. And also, we have a problem that the fund is not localized, and also there is when the organizations they have an access, like in Khartoum and in Jazeera, there is no great response on the ground, and there is no operation because we are the one know what's going on and how to do that things. So we are echoing what all colleagues said, that we need more collaboration, we need real action on the ground, we need more fund and more money and more humanitarian and safe access to our colleagues on the ground to be able to save our people. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ahmed. If I can call now on Ms. Pascal Grottenhuis, Vice Minister in DG for International Cooperation, Kingdom of Netherlands.
Thank you so much, and I will follow the example of all the people who put away their notes, because actually I just feel very quiet after hearing all these stories, and I don't know so much what to say and what can we do and how can we actually come to the collective action with all the good people in the room, because I think we all want the same thing, and how can we leave this room more, I don't know, more driven or with even a bigger purpose or action oriented that we will. So I'm just going to be very brief because my mind is just after hearing the stories of both Gaza and Sudan. What we will do as the Netherlands is we will announce on Thursday, and I'm on strict notice not to say anything, but I'm going to do it anyway, another 60 million for humanitarian aid because it's needed, and I wish it wasn't. I think we should all stick up for international humanitarian law. I think so many speakers before me have said it much more eloquently, but I think we really have to stick together. And also, Tetri said it very well, don't question the numbers, don't question the sources, and just state the right information and stick behind it. I always think that we are with more people. So let's stick together and see how we can leave this room with more action and also the angriness that you said, Cindy. Why are we not shouting? I think it's either shouting or becoming really quiet because it's so much. Thank you for all the work that everybody's been doing on this.
Thank you so much. It really is a lot. If I can call on Sheikha Haya Al-Thani, Strategic Partnerships Manager of the Qatar Fund for Development.
Thank you so much. I actually don't have the luxury of closing my notes because our Director General had to walk out and with him our notes. That's problematic for us, but I echo what you just said. It's very difficult to speak about accomplishments and what we've done, having heard what's happening on the ground right now. But I can say as Qatar, we remain committed to our partners because at the end of the day, it is through the partners that we deliver aid and assistance globally. We have upcoming agreements that to be signed within the hour with FAO, with IFAD, all in support for food and food security across the world. Of course, WFP, we're already continuing to our partnership and support to them, but others, UNDP, for example, is a constant partner that complements a lot of our initiatives, and we continue to do so through either core funding or our programmatic funding. And what I could say is we're going to continue to do that and hopefully multiply, and advocate for others to join us. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you so much, Sheikha. Ms. Julia Monar, Director General for Humanitarian and Peace Building Affairs, MFA of Germany.
Thank you very much, and I would like to thank all the conveners of this meeting, and I echo my Dutch colleague. I'm also very impressed and speechless in a way, because it's one thing to sit here and another thing to have this firsthand experience that you told us and described to us about the situation in Gaza. I just wanted to say that we have sort of tried to ramp up our humanitarian diplomacy. I think humanitarian diplomacy is important, although we may not see immediate results, but I think this meeting will encourage us to not stop, to try to ask and demand that access for the humanitarian organizations. You could see, we know that it's not really the lack of food, but it's the impossibility to get the food to the people that are starving. That's deeply frustrating. And we would also like to highlight our full support for what you said, that maybe, the criteria for classifying a famine have been criticized or attacked, but we will fully support that process and that analysis, and we have confidence in the independence and in the expertise of everybody that has called the attention to a famine. We will continue to allocate our funds to the World Food Program as one of our major partners, and we will strengthen and they can strengthen its support to the process in high priority countries. We have allocated nearly 830 million in humanitarian assistance this year, and we will try to continue to do so. And also, with all the stories I heard today, I think we are more capable as civil servants or as politicians to explain to the people in our countries and to the members of parliament that in a moment when funds are cut and budgets are cut, that humanitarian assistance is the one purpose that you should not forget. You should really not be. You should not forget all the pictures and all the images you see every night, as we do every night on TV. So we stand ready to support any kind of conversation and what can we do to avert and famine during a conflict. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Monar. Mr. Charles Awuba, CEO of Action Against Hunger.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you all. Cindy, thank you for your leadership. Thank you. We need access, but safe access. This morning, before I came down from the hotel and everything, speaking with staff, something that we always pray doesn't happen has happened again in Gaza. We lost another staff. Within 4 months, this is the second time. So it's not just access. We're talking about safe access. If you look at what is happening around DRC, Sudan, South Sudan, Yemen, and all those countries that we're working in with all those challenges and difficulties, we have no choice but to continue to be able to engage and help those people because their voices are not heard in many of those places. So here in this room are powerful people. The good guys are here. The question then becomes, what are we going to do when we assemble? And I hope our discussions here will become a clarion call for all of us to take concrete actions for us to be able to move forward. The world is looking at us now, and there are so many challenges that it gets to a point where can we even deliver? But I think if anything at all, let's look at history. While we've not seen this before, and Cindy, you're right, what has happened today, we've never seen that before. But if you look back, there's situations where things were so bad. But history has taught us that in the end, good will always trump bad. And that is the reason why, as we gather here today, we cannot lose hope. We need to look forward to tomorrow. Because without looking forward to tomorrow, why do you want to wake up in the first place? We cannot defeat ourselves. We need to gather energy in this room to be able to move forward because we can and we should because we've done it before. Just this morning, we had another meeting and said, why are we not telling the good stories? We have succeeded on many, many, many places. We're just talking about Somalia. When we were looking at data and we said, can we declare famine in Somalia and others? We didn't, because we worked together. Going back to the year 2010, the drought that happened, the work that we did in Somalia and everything, we couldn't declare famine in Somalia because we did that work. Why is this story not being told around the world? I say this because instead of us being morose and sad and everything, we need to go back and gather energy from the kinds of things that we've done in the past and charge forward and be able to, because it is possible. We can and we should be able to do so. We've worked with many of you around this table. We all celebrated when we passed resolution 2417 to be able to go forward. Yes, there are challenges, but I think we can go forward. And so my whole thing to share with you is that let's look at history. In the end, good will always trump bad. And there are many, many voices. As I travel around the world, I've just come from Ethiopia, speaking with our country director. One of the most challenging decisions he had to make was telling women in our treatment center and children close to dying with their ribs coming out that we didn't have the funding and so they needed to go home. What a difficult situation. And so my whole message is to encourage all of us. It is possible. We can do this together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Awuba, for those words of wisdom. In these moments, it's easy to feel defeated, but appreciate your words. If I can give the floor now to Ms. Elise Moschini, Permanent Observer and Head of Delegation to the UNICRC.
Thanks very much. I find it important in this discussion and in this room to come back to something from the very beginning of the discussion. So, I mean, Commissioner Labib, you started by talking about the preventable nature of the problem we're discussing and that we're all working very hard to address. And I think in this room among humanitarians who know how to do our jobs when we're given the space to operate and also the resources among the states who are gathered here, who are generously contributing both their financial resources and their backing, again, to allow us to have that access, and screaming as loudly as they can, and sometimes just as loud as we do ourselves, when all the unthinkable things happen, when humanitarians are not just in harm's way, but are receiving the brunt of the violence and prevented from doing their jobs. I think just on this line of the preventable nature, and Guyana and Slovenia also alluded to it in their function as being co-focal points on this, is preventable, at least in the experience of the Red Cross, of the ICRC, really comes back to the fact that the starvation and the kind of starvation that we're talking about here today is caused by the way that wars are fought and by the rules of war that are transgressed increasingly so today. And we've spoken here again, it's been mentioned, IHL, the Geneva Conventions, and just recognizing, and not to come out and read the rule book, but to remember that the provisions of the law are absolutely explicit and very detailed on a number of points, and they're not complex. They're really, really straightforward. Right? It's about not depriving people of their means of their survival. It's about not damaging the natural environment so that for generations people don't survive after a conflict. These things can be done. And certainly we would argue that the paper that these rules are written on, in this case, the Geneva Conventions, are worth much more than that paper, right? And not just that they're really fundamental to our humanity, and to not allowing this slide to go any further. So we would just make this call to all states to be investing in those rules, and investing along with their peers in seeing that those rules are upheld on each and every occasion. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much. If I can now call on Ms. Tara Sumro, the Ambassador of the Economic and Social Council, United Kingdom.
Thank you. It's hard to add when there have been so many rich comments and thoughtful remarks around the table. But I guess what I wanted to start by saying, and Charles, you noted it as well, Sudan and Gaza and what's happening there is absolutely abominable. What we see happening in Myanmar, in South Sudan, and DRC demonstrate up, situations that are getting worse as well, and situations which we also need to be mindful of to avoid further deterioration. But I think Elise, you sort of mentioned it, but this is preventable. We can do something about it, and fundamentally, being here in New York, the tools that are strongest and most effective are diplomatic. Those are the tools that will provide lasting solutions, and that's why, from a UK perspective, our actions in the Security Council, working with the co-focal points, working with others around the table. That's where we think, it's most important to take forward not just what's happening in Gaza and Sudan, but in other parts of the world as well. The other thing I would say is international humanitarian law, building on the ICRC points. That is our greatest defense. And the UK launched a handbook on conflict and hunger, providing practical guidance and clear recommendations, but it's not rocket science. It's straightforward. And the problem doesn't seem to be reading and adhering to the rules. The problem is the way that war is conducted now. And then the final point, Joyce, you mentioned it, but the reset. We are in a world where there is less financial resources out there to respond to a growing level of need. That means prioritization, which is really hard in the context that we're dealing with and in the challenges that people are facing. But we have to do it somehow. Localization, and Hanan mentioned it, localization is really important. It's difficult, but it's part of the solution. And we have to make sure that more resources are getting to those organizations that are able to respond most effectively and know the needs of the people on the ground. But I'll stop there and thank you to those who put this event together.
Thank you so much. And that brings to a close our session. I think the key takeaways for everyone is that this is a man-made preventable crisis. It's not just about access, it's about safe access. Thank you so much for all the work that you've all put in.
Thank you so much. Likewise. Thank you so much. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'll see you probably tomorrow. So I